Welcome to Kirklees Council's Environment and Climate Change Scrutiny Panel. I'm the chair of the meeting. I'm Andrew Cooper. I'll now go through the panel in turn.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Matthew McLaughlin from the Colne Valley Ward.
Kevin Evans, Co-op D.
Good afternoon, everyone. David Longstaff, Almonbury Ward.
Councillor John Taylor, Kirkburton Ward.
Dalton Ward.
And we're also joined by
Councillor Joe Lawson, Crostonbourne, Neverton Ward.
who's not a member of the panel but is here to speak during the meeting, during the items. Okay, next item, minutes of the previous meeting. Apologies. Yes, have we any apologies?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Anything anybody wishes to raise under those? Okay. Any declarations of interest?
I've got to declare that I'm a serving magistrate judge and I deal with fly tipping cases. So I should say it's all my fault.
Chair,
Okay.
I'm the alternative director for, I'll get this wrong, Suez Kirklees Recycling and Recovery Board Limited.
Okay, thank you very much. Admission of the public. We are very happy to admit the public. Deputations of petitions. I'm not aware of any for this meeting. Public question time. No, we haven't got anybody there. So we'll now go to the first item, litter packed presentation. Sorry about that. It shouldn't be a tongue twister, should it? So over to Natalie and Andrea.
Thank you.
And I forgot to introduce you, didn't I? Which is wrong.
It's okay, Chair. Councillor Amanda Pinnock, Councillor for the Ashbrow Ward, and also a Cabinet Member for Communities, Environmental Health, Parks and Open Spaces. So the first agenda item, litter pack presentation. Is that correct, Chair? Thank you. So the presentation that will be presented today by Keep Britain Tidy. Keeping Britain Tidy, or Keep Britain Tidy, is a national organisation, and they've chosen Heckmondwike to pilot their campaign. So it's a privilege to have them. Love Where You Live Heckmondwike is a great opportunity to understand why people litter. I'll start again. That's better. Thank you. So we will have a presentation from Keep Britain Tidy. So Keep Britain Tidy is a national organisation that has chosen Heckmondwike to pilot their campaign, and it's a privilege to have them. Love Where You Live Heckmondwike is a great opportunity to understand why people litter and work towards challenging attitudes. The project aims to highlight even the smallest and unintended actions can still count as litter. So the message is clear to the general public. No matter how careful it looks, litter is still litter. 37% of residents in Heckmondwike did not feel proud of their area, but 44% of locals were willing to get involved to improve their communities. During the presentation, you'll hear about some of the successful projects taking place in Heckmondwike, which has led to a significant reduction in litter. For example, Bin It for Good saw a reduction of 51% of litter in the area. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank community litter picking groups throughout Kirklees who invest in our area, take the time to organise community cleanups, and sometimes all year round. I would like to support these groups as much as I can because of the fantastic work that they do for us. I'll now pass over to Keep Britain Tidy for them to go through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. I'm Natalie, I'm from Keep Britain Tidy, and I'm here with my colleague Andrea.
Hi, lovely to see you all. I'm the COO at Keep Britain Tidy.
That was a lovely introduction, thank you. So it's really an honour to be invited here today to talk about this special project. And as Councillor Pinnock mentioned, it's a project we're calling Love Where You Live Heckmondwike. So just a little bit about our organisation. Keep Britain's vision is of a clean and healthy environment, rich in wildlife, valued by people who love where they live. And if any of you know Heckmondwike, that's the green area in the bandstand there, and that's local minor celebrity Graham Dawson, PCOS. So, Keep Britain Tidy as an organisation, we are experts in behaviour change and volunteer engagement, and we've delivered many interventions over the years around changing behaviour when it comes to litter, fly tipping, etc. And just really tapping into that sense of community pride and people caring about where they live. As we've mentioned, the volunteers were touched on today, and we have an army of volunteers who pick up litter all year round, up and down the nation. But in Heckmondwike, there's also some really prolific litter picking groups who are really been a key part of this. So we've got all that knowledge, that information, and this project was kind of born from the appetite to do something with that expertise in a kind of significant and sustained way. So the Litter Pact Heckmondwike project has the ambition of creating significant change in a single area over a 12-month period. The aims are to reduce litter on the ground, change the public's attitude to littering, as well as their perception of how tidy the area is, as well as how they feel about that, and create a blueprint to help other local authorities to do the same. The project partners for this particular piece of work are partners who work closely with Keep Britain Tidy on other projects. Kirklees Council on this occasion, and leading food and drink brands including Coca-Cola, KFC, Mars Wrigley, McDonald's and Nestle. So why Heckmondwike? Big question, because I know obviously lots of you here represent other areas. When we decided we wanted to do this project, we knew we needed a kind of ward-sized area, just for the scale and the population size. So we sought a sort of small town area, so not a major city, somewhere that had a sort of population under about 20,000. It could represent anywhere in the kind of north, so you know, other similar areas can look to replicate this work elsewhere. So not a city, but it has some footfall, it has some kind of passing traffic and an opportunity to engage people beyond them stepping out of their doorstep. So it does have a little kind of shopping area, a little market which has been recently refurbished, Morrison's, etc. So half of the lower super output area is in the top two most deprived deciles of the IMD. And geographically it's quite ideal just because of the nature of the boundaries. So it's kind of intersected with the M60, Bradford, Leeds, Huddersfield, and felt sort of quite ideal space-wise. We first came to Heckmondwike during, I think it was 2019, and the former chair of Keep Britain Tidy's all-party parliamentary group, Kim Leadbeater, is obviously the MP for the area. So we worked closely with Kim for many years. She invited us to do a litter pick during the Great British Spring Clean with her constituency, and we visited the area of Heckmondwike, which was shown in the picture actually. So over a period of time, we've kind of got to know and understand this little community. So when we were looking for an area, we just knew this was perfect. So there's a couple of strands of activity in this project, which I'm going to just highlight to you now, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail. First of all, we've been gathering data and monitoring kind of litter on the ground and public perception. We've done a baseline, and then we're doing an end of project repeat of that to see the difference we've made. Strand 2 is around rolling out the behaviour change interventions, which are tried and tested to reduce littering behaviours. Strand 3 is marketing comms and PR, i.e. telling people that we're doing this. Strand 4, there's been community engagement in the area. And then finally, as we come towards the end of the project, we'll be moving into political engagement. So today being part of that, not just locally, but nationally as well, and looking at supporting other local authorities too. So data collection. Before we began the project in the area, our team of trained researchers went out and conducted a local environmental quality survey on litter where they literally go out and count litter on the ground, and they're actually there this week doing the closeout survey. So we've been looking at the weather forecast and worrying about all kinds of variables, but essentially that is to literally count how much litter, what type and where it is, to allow us to map hotspots and understand where to target interventions for particular littering behaviours. We've also done 2 focus groups that have helped us co-design what this initiative should look like. So we initially came into the area thinking that we should do a sort of promise or get people to sign up to kind of make a promise to be litter free. The public gave a really clear indication that they didn't think that that was suitable, but what they did think was the action should be that businesses and schools should be able to sign up. So it helped sculpt the project. And then we've also done a public perception surveying. So how do you feel about where you live? Is it littered? How proud do you feel, etc. So this took place in autumn 2024. And as I've mentioned, a kind of the point of the data is to give us an evidence base for where we're going to place interventions, where needs help, and what the particular problems are. So you can see here the images are showing you where there are hotspots for particular litter types. So this is an example of fly tipping. So our map showed that there's a particular hotspot. Here's the evidence, and that's then we matched with the council. Yep, they're in agreement. They're also the hotspots. So we've got a place to start. Our ground litter survey is something we do nationally up and down the country for councils, and it builds a really holistic picture of the problem on the ground. So there's a national scale called Coupler, which basically shows that it counts what's called transects, so the little small areas called dots, and it scores them A, B, C, D, etc. Anything below B- is a fail. So nationally, around 7.4% of transects fail in an area. In Heckman-Wyke it was 17%. So this survey tells us we've got some work to do, there's an opportunity to improve this. So as Councillor Pinnock's mentioned as well, just over half of the residents agreed that they love where they live, and that's 10% less than the national average. So there's an opportunity to increase that sense of pride and that feeling of loving where they live. Residents did feel really strongly that the way that shops and businesses in the area look and take care of the area around them was a priority, which is why we've come on to the community engagement component, which includes businesses. And 44% agree that people are willing to work together to make a difference to the area looks. So now on to the intervention strand 2. The bottom left intervention, still littering, is designed to tackle, as Councillor Pinnock mentioned, and has kindly done some media work on this for us as well. There's a type of littering behaviour which we kind of call leave behind. So it's politely tucking a crisp packet into a park bench, it's placing a coffee cup on top of a flower planter. You're not throwing it on the ground, but you are leaving it behind. So we've targeted this intervention to the green area, anywhere that had kind of benches which are for sitting and having kind of food on the go, etc. And I'll show you some results shortly. That's just a visual. So the family with the bin there, those are the guys from Rainbow Baby Bank in the area, and that's a project called Bin It for Good. So Bin It for Good we've run elsewhere in the country over the years, haven't we? And we know that it has a really good return rate on reducing litter. So basically the premise is the more litter that's in the bin, the less that's on the ground, the greater the donation to local charities. And the public were asked to vote on this, and they chose 3 local charities that were close to the hearts. And especially big thanks to the team in the council who went round and weighed and counted the litter in support of this, making sure that the framework was robust and fair. And then we've got Bin Your Gum. So this is part of a national project where grants are given to local authorities to help them clean up gum and reduce littering. So Heckman-Wyke has been one of the areas that's benefited from that, as well as Marsden. And we were walking here earlier, and the High Street was done last year in the main strip of shops here. We are also working on at the moment fly tipping intervention. So that actually segues with the presentation that Kat will give to you shortly, but essentially wrapping fly tipped areas with crime scene tape to notify people that one, fly tipping is a crime, but also that it's been recognised and understood by the council. I know one of the challenges you face is multiple reports of the same instance of fly tipping. So really this is saying it's a crime, it's not right, we know it's here. And we've been doing, this little lady here is the poo fairy, so we've been doing a dog poo campaign in a hotspot area which has particular problem. And then we're also doing our national Bin the Butt campaign, which is about smoking cigarette butts. By engaging with local businesses, we're offering these free butt boxes through pubs, etc. in the area. So Strand 3, as I've mentioned, Councillor Pinnock is actually quoted in the media snip there that's from the I think that's from the TNA, I can't see from here. So we've been doing, alongside doing all this activity, we've also been telling the public about this activity, which I think is a really key thing. And actually loads of great stuff goes on every day and people just don't know about that. So a big pillar of this campaign has been to tell that story. So that's come through media, local media activity, and we've gained favourable coverage in lots of local print, broadcast media with a positive sentiment. Out-of-home ads, so this is the billboards. We've been running billboards on some of the interventions, but also to summarise some of the results and tell people the positive impact that we've made, just so we're spreading that awareness. We've been doing regular emails, and we've also been doing paid and organic social media in the area to help people receive the message that this is happening. So Strand 4 is business engagement, and we've distributed, actually Youssef, who's featured here, is our project officer, is out today dropping off packs, the second wave of packs to businesses which explain all about the interventions and how they can get involved, etc. So we've engaged businesses and community groups containing posters, talking points of customers, etc. We've also rolled out an adopt an area scheme to local businesses and community groups so they can kind of get involved beyond what they might usually do. And we're developing a good business guide with those stakeholders to understand what best practice might look like around taking care of their shop front. And we're also running some schools engagement activity. So Strand 5 is political and local authority engagement. So part of this is obviously, you know, Councillor Pinnock has been involved in some of the media work, meeting you guys here today, working really closely with the council to understand those local issues in this sort of like hyper-local area, but then understand the bigger trends that might affect other local authorities. So when we wrap, which will be around Christmas with our activity, we'll go into development of a blueprint, which is a best practice guide to talk about what we've learned, how other local authorities might apply that learning, and really just, I guess, bolster this idea that actually there's loads of stuff going on. How do we make sure that everybody knows and this is celebrated? So we'll be launching this at our Keep Britain Tidy Annual Network Conference Award, where Kat is invited to speak. Kim Leadbeater will also be on the panel, so we'll be engaging other local authorities, and it's an opportunity to position Kirklees Council as a kind of leader of this pilot with us. And then we're very much hoping that we'll do an event in Westminster off the back of our Tidy Britain all-party parliamentary group, and kind of showcase those learnings. So, how have we done so far? So as I've mentioned, they're out counting the litter today, and we're still doing the close-out perception surveys, so I haven't got all the data to give you at this moment in time, but what I can tell you is that Being It for Good showed a 52% reduction in litter. Still Littering showed a 41% reduction in litter, and Bin Your Gum nationally has been shown to reduce litter by up to 80%. But I thought it was better to illustrate kind of the notice that local residents had taken of the difference by this quote, which Nick actually found, which says, it was a Facebook post, and it said, "Back in the day, I used to regard Heckman Wyke as Dewsbury's scruffier neighbour. I think the tables have turned. The town centre is busy, all the retail units are open, and it's clean and tidy." So to us, that just feels like, you know, you've got that anecdotal evidence that people have noticed something's happened. So the sort of next steps for us really are just finalising the rollout of the last interventions, prepping to develop the blueprint, our endline data gathering, which is happening now, working together with Kirklees Council on the fly tipping strategy, which Kat's going to present to you in a moment. And we're also carrying out an economic impact assessment on the project. So we're working with some very intelligent data analysts who are basically going to be able to ascribe the economic value of a tidier place to be, which will fold into the blueprint. And as it's under development at the moment, I can't tell you how that's going to look, but what I will be able to say is that's something that's replicable for other local authorities, and also really key to the kind of MHCLG strategy in Pride and Place.
Thank you very much. Very good. Right, so we're going to be looking at the Kirklees fly tipping paper after this. Any particular questions on what you've heard here today? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for coming to Kirklees actually as well. So, I mean, it's a shame really, I was just looking around the table and we're all Huddersfield-based councillors, which is not ideal. But my question really is, I represent a rural ward, so quite a big geographic area. There's probably more sheep than people kind of area, which is all small villages. How does this translate, or how would you translate this? Because we have real problems with both fly tipping and littering, because often it's rural country roads where it's easy for somebody to turn up in a van, dump their stuff and go, because they're not going to be seen or being visible. So what is it that I could take from this that would be of value to me to talk to my residents about? Because it's very, very different from a small, tight urban town.
Thank you for the question. I think, as you've observed, yes, we're looking in an urban or a suburban area with this, but what we've done here is look at what types of interventions suit that area. So what we would suggest and say is, if what you need to do is look at the evidence for the area and how that works and what potentially works in those spaces, and we'll through the blueprint we'll be talking a bit more about how to do that. For the particular issue of fly tipping, I don't want to preempt what Kat's going to say on that, but again, it's that evidence-led piece and saying, okay, what is the type of fly tipping? How is it happening? What is the pattern that we're seeing? And therefore, what are the interventions that are going to work best in those places? So, yes, they may be different interventions, but the principles will still be exactly the same. Is there anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think at the start of the piece of work they've done on Heckman Wyke, they did loads of data collection on the types of litter that then informed the interventions. So to do the same thing in a different area, you'd want to take a good evidence base of the types of litter. You might not be getting careful littering, you might be getting a different kind of issue. You might not have a lot of dog poo, but you might have a lot of fly tipping. So it would be doing the same level of data collection to develop what is an evidence-based approach, because most of the interventions, although these ones have been in Heckman Wyke, Keep It Tidy have done interventions up and down the country, so at some point they'll have done an intervention in a similar area. So it's mapping your data, your evidence base, with an intervention to then come back and then you measure afterwards, so you know whether it has or hasn't worked. So it's about getting that data collection at the start to understand what's driving your problem.
So if I've understood this, that data collection was undertaken by Keep It Tidy. So obviously you haven't got the capacity to undertake that type of work across the whole of the country, nor across the whole of Kirklees. So the question is this of any value to the rest of Kirklees because unless the council is going to provide the resources to undertake that data collection, we fall over at the first point.
So one of the things I'm going to speak about in my presentation on fly tipping is about developing a fly tipping and litter strategy, and the strategy will look and do workshops and do a lot of collection of information before we develop it. So we will do some level of collection of information, maybe not to this level of detail, but there'll be a level of having a much more rich level of data from across the district to inform our approaches going forward, because what we're trying to move towards, I don't think we're ever going to get this standard because it's very, you know, in every single area, it's very intensive, it's very costly. But what we can definitely do is move to a more evidence-based approach with fly tipping, litter, all of these local environmental quality issues. So moving us towards a more evidence-based approach through a strategy.
Right. So I'm going to be interested to see the next presentation. I'm interested in your presentation, but I'm interested to see about the transfer over and as to what elements that we've learnt from your campaign in Heckman White, to see what sort of things might transfer across. You know, what the learning is, because the two presentations are connected, aren't they? In that way. Just one thing I picked up: you've got the all-party parliamentary group. That you mentioned. I just wondered whether you're also engaging with the local government association as well, because there's the neighbourhoods policy committee is probably the best place for you to get people involved there, because they will be amplifying pretty much the same messages that you've got to Parliament. And so, yeah, just wondered if you were keyed into the LGA at all.
Thank you. We have been to the LGA conference before. We have spoken with the LGA before. I think it's a really good point you've made about speaking specifically to that committee. And yeah, it's one I'll be taking forward. But thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, right. So, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. No, thank you for the presentation, and as John Taylor says, thank you for coming to Kirklees and doing this work. It is very impressive, and I'm interested to see the final results. Maybe we could, if you're a bit too busy to come back, if you could let us know what the final results were, maybe in an email, that would be fantastic.
We're never too busy for a little trip to Yorkshire.
Just a few sort of more granular questions, just so I can get a handle on how successful the operation has been and maybe challenges you might have found. On the community engagement, you say the programme's obviously still ongoing and more people are getting involved all the time, but so far, how many local businesses, community groups and individuals have signed up and engaged with the project?
Yeah, so we've been in the area for a while, and as I mentioned, we've kind of been getting to know the area and those kind of change makers in the area for a little while through the MP. So obviously community action does take a while to embed yourself, you know, get your faces known and people to trust you. But I think that we've made some really key ins with what we'd call community amplifiers in the area, those local change makers, those people who want to make a difference. And what's really interesting, a reflection for me, is they're the people who are doing everything. They're working with the schools, they're working with the community groups, they care about this agenda. So part of this work is really to build the profile of those people. So one example is there's a local litter picking group called Keep Hecky Tidy, and there's a lady who is one of the key organisers called Pam. We've actually used Pam to front some of the advertising and social media to say to other residents, Pam tidies up in this area, Pam volunteers here. You know, look at Pam, let's feel proud of where we live. And so we've got kind of engagement rates on that, how many people we've reached, etc. But we've also got the kind of positive sentiment that's been expressed for that feeling, and people, and the kind of anecdotally at this stage, because obviously we're not at the evidence summarisation point, but anecdotally I can tell you that people are really liking that, and it's kind of giving people that feeling of like, somebody's paying notice to what's happening on the ground here. And those groups actually feel that they're being recognised as well for what they're doing. So I'd say that's been one of the really key sort of feelings that's bubbled up as a result of that.
And I need to check with with Nat on this. How many of the areas have now been adopted? Because you divided it into 13 areas?
14. We divided
14.
it into 14 areas. So we divided the ward up. So there's been schools, the MP's office and one of the local businesses, etc., community groups. So I think we're on about 8 of the 14, which, given that we only launched that last month, is positive. So we'll just hope to see that grow, and that's the idea with that, is it's kind of part of the legacy that as we leave, these groups have been suitably trained. We've helped them write risk assessments, we've provided them with the kit. So Nick's been liaising with the library to create a library lending of litter picking equipment that will be there permanently. We've created a hub at the MP's office, for example, for people to borrow kit. So the idea is that grows, and as they recruit people, their friends, family, colleagues, etc., to come along and do the cleanups with them, people get that bug and they want to join, and that grows. And I think that that's just really part of us not just crashing into the area and doing something and being like, everybody clean up, and us hosting an event. It's giving people the skills, the training, and the passion to, you know, to see that that's a problem and that they can actually kind of take some action themselves.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, so it's been schools, businesses, community groups. I can't give you the numbers until we do the analysis, but they, as Nat was saying, they've been engaged right from the start. So we had a launch event. We were saying this morning, was that back in April? And we had quite a number of business leaders and community leaders, the police, local religious groups, and local businesses all at that launch. And we'll do the same at the end as well, bring everybody back together. And obviously we'll invite all of yourselves to that as well. So hopefully we can bring the community back together at the end too. But
we've dropped those packs that I spoke about off to multiple businesses. So I think it's about 45 individuals have had those packs, so there's 2 drops. So there's a process now to kind of get feedback on that, etc. But yeah, sorry, I can't be more specific about numbers. We're still kind of counting things up.
No, that's gratefully received information. Thank you very much. So I infer from what you've just said that quite a lot of this work is about taking what already existed and supplementing it and improving it and growing it. So are other parts of the blueprint work that are happening in other parts of the country focusing on how to perhaps begin intervention on the ground where there might not be pre-existing PAMs in areas that don't have that kind of infrastructure in existence? Will that be part of the overall work of the project nationally?
So we should be more specific. So the litter pack, this work is only happening in this borough. So that's why it's quite unique for us. What we have done is, as you were saying, the types of intervention where it's very different, it's very hands-off. We say, okay, we're going to test this in this area with this council, and we will look at the results of that. And we have at least 2 decades worth of information and data on how that type of thing works that we will incorporate into the litter pact. And what we wanted to do with this one was exactly as you described, look at the community involvement element and how do we make sure that whatever we learn, as your colleague councillor was saying, how do we make it applicable to other areas as well? So it's taking where you do have more resources, where you do have the start of community engagement, how can other local authorities learn from that and take that forward, and where they don't have that as well, what can they do? So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If I may carry on, Chair? Or do you want to come in, Kevin? I've had 2 bites to the chair.
Thank you. Just on your strands of activity, you've got some, what I would describe as probably quite expensive pieces to carry out there. So the engagement you've already mentioned, you've also got the marketing, comms, PR, where there's presumably a relatively large initial spend and front loading. I guess my question is, you're coming to an end around the Christmas period. You're going to see the end line survey carried out pretty much at the same time that advertising and PR activity stops, I assume. I'm curious if there's any plans to follow up either through Keep Britain Tidy or through the council itself on a sort of 12 months post-cessation of the expensive public-facing things. You know, there's radio ads and billboards and so on. Once they stop, do you still see the same sustainment? Because I think that's a really important question for other councils looking to onboard this. Am I getting the 12-month project that you've described and a big win, but then it tails off?
Yeah, and I think that's why we started with we want a 12-month project, because actually we know a lot of the interventions by us and others that go on the ground are a matter of weeks. So Bin It for Good's unusual in that it ran for 3 waves and it actually ran over 3 months, and we've still littering in place. As Andrea says, you know, that's something that we do through our network, not a huge outlay. What I would say is that, yes, there has been ad spend. I would still say that's been it's not been a huge, yes, the out of home and a little bit on paid social, but I would say it isn't, aside from that, a huge cost. And obviously councils own and run in inventory as well. I think that the envelope of the sort of spend on this would fall within a comms team's budget within a council, so I wouldn't see it as being anything out of reach of that. The comms, the PR, etc., it's been done in-house by me and an agency and my team. So I think it's probably it's the resource that's the expense with the project. But I think that there's also the basic hypothesis that I'm trying to understand here is, do people feel better if you tell them that it's happening? It's not just doing it, but it's reminding people, and it's pulling up that story of Pam and saying, this local person does this, don't you feel good about where you live now? And shifting that perception. And I think that's where when we began this, we wanted to not just understand about litter, but how do people feel about the places that they live? Like, you know, deep down, and is there anything we can do about that sense of an area that maybe doesn't feel as proud as other areas in the country?
Thank you, Nat. I think they're really important points. I think the good thing about working with Kirklees is they're recognising, as you were saying, that this is a very specific one-off project, and they're looking at how do you take that and adapt it into the litter strategy, into the fly tipping strategy, and that's something that we can't anticipate, but obviously your colleagues will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just another quick point of clarification. On the results presented on, I don't have the slide numbers, page 40 of our packs, you've got 52% litter reduction and 41% litter reduction. Are those the local figures? Because the third figure is a national figure, so are those the headline figures?
Yeah, so they're specific to the interventions in the area that they ran. So very specific area, and as I mentioned, they were targeted to the specific behaviour. So Bin It for Good was placed in a high footfall, it's called Town Market Square, so it's like a car park cenotaph type one where the shops are. So we needed footfall for that one. And as I say, Nick's team were instrumental in going out and counting the results and supporting us with that methodology to make sure it was statistically robust. Still littering was in the centre in a green space where we know that the behaviour is likely to be where people have sat down and had. I mean, on so many days people sat down. It's a really nice fish and chip shop. So people were sat having the chips. So they're targeted to those areas. So yes, they are hyper-local results as a result of those interventions in that area. Chewing gum, that's the national statistic, because obviously we're sort of part way through. The signs are up, it's cleansed. That's not finished, as it were. Yeah, and that's the limitation that I've got today, really, is that I'm not coming to you with the full complement of data.
I entirely understand. What I want to say is that's very impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And, we'll have that.
Put that
we were delighted.
A big tick in the pros column for carrying on this kind of work. And I couldn't agree with you more about the importance of perception. Because managing public perception and mood, it often gets left out of public policy because you can't quantify it, or it's difficult to quantify compared to how many bits of litter have we picked up or how many prosecutions have there been, because those are numbers. But changing how people feel about where they live is so valuable, because it can add to a sense of pride, and we often deal in council with problems that compound themselves, but solutions can compound themselves as well. And the more we can get people to love and respect and take care of their area, the more likely it is to become self-regulating and self-perpetuating. So I absolutely couldn't agree with you more. And just building on that point, then going back to the conversation about how we as Kirklees are going to take this forward, and this may be a question for yourself, Councillor Pinnock, as our political lead on the matter. What's obviously it's dependent on budget and consultation and all of the complicated and interesting work that goes into a strategy, but what's the political intention to take this work forward and help roll it out across the rest of the borough?
That is a question for me. Thank you for the question. Right, okay. So, as already been pointed out, there will be another presentation on the fly tipping strategy and litter picking strategy. And when Kat goes through that, she will also explain, particularly towards the end, about community engagement. So, you know, what we need is that wealth of information from members, from residents, from businesses and so on, as to what they want to see and how they see this working in the short term and the long term. And clearly the intention is to see that through to a conclusion and ensure the budget is there in place for that to happen. That's obviously, you know, my intention. That's what I'm hoping to achieve from this. But a lot more information will come to light as we go through this process. Kat will go through what the intentions are in terms of the strategy, but as time goes on, we will see that come to fruition, the strategy itself, and see what direction the local authorities wanted to take in that respect.
Happy with that? Yeah? Okay. Right. Okay, so now we go on to solutions to fly tipping solutions. We'll talk among yourselves while we change things around a wee bit. Thank you very much. I feel we'll have that intermission lift music or something like that, don't we? Do 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 do.
Thank you. So I'm going to do a bit of an intro. That will
yes, you do, don't you? Yeah, we get intros with everything. Thanks for that, Councillor
That's my thing. I'm the intro girl. Okay. So I'm delighted to introduce this timely report on fly tipping today to enable Scrutiny to have a deep dive into illegal waste and how it negatively impacts our streets, our parks, our towns and villages, our mental health and our environment, and the steps the local authority intends to take to tackle these systemic behaviours and trends. As a walker, there's nothing uglier than to see unsightly and disgusting waste left at the side of the pavement, down alleyways, and affecting our beautiful green spaces. We all have a responsibility and we have a duty of care. This problem isn't unique to Kirklees. We've seen a 20% rise nationally of fly tipping, and you'll hear as well that 60% of illegal waste is actually from households, and it's costing the local authority millions of pounds. Just think what the local authority could do with that money. How could we put it to better use for the betterment of Kirklees residents? It is food for thought when you think of it in that sense. So it's critical that we understand why people fly tipping and deal with the root causes. Most recently, the council has struggled with the backlog of fly tipping, and it's taken 12 weeks or more to deal with reports, and often questions have come up in council and in cabinet about this. So it certainly isn't where we want to be. However, we've been successful in significantly bringing those numbers down, and I'd like to thank council officers for working hard and their commitment to bringing those numbers down. We're working towards developing a strategy, as I've alluded to earlier on, to tackling illegal dumping and litter, but we can't do it alone. To create a robust plan, we need members like yourselves in this room, we need residents, we need businesses, we need community groups, and also experts like Keep Britain Tidy to devise this plan to come up with a short-term and long-term solution. So there's a lot of work to do, but I can assure you that the team are enthusiastic and are motivated to see this through. So I'll now hand over to Kat for her to go through the presentation.
Thank you.
Just wait till it shares. Okay. Afternoon, everyone. Most of you know me. I'm Catherine Armitage. I'm the Service Director for Climate Change and Environmental Strategy here at Kirklees Council. I'm going to take you through some of the work we've been doing on fly tipping, so where we are now and what we want to do next to get on top of this very big issue. So a little bit of background. What is fly tipping? Illegal dumping of waste on land it doesn't belong on and doesn't have a licence to accept it. It can range from a few bags to huge truckloads of waste. Councils are responsible on public land, the EA where it's often larger scale or hazardous waste, and the landowner where it's on private land. Why on earth am I telling you this? You councillors, people come and talk to you about fly tipping all the time, you know what it is, you talk about it an awful lot. Because depending on the type of fly tipping, depends on the way in which you might want to tackle that fly tipping. So there are different solutions for different types of fly tipping, so it's quite important to point out that there are different people fly tipping, and the way in which we might want to address that or get that down might be different, so it will make sense a little bit later on. So a bit of background, as you've already heard, fly tipping's up 20% over the last 5 years nationally. This is a mammoth issue that councils up and down the land are contending with. And then there's some quite obvious things in there. 60% of fly tipping is household waste. That's on the increase, it's gone up 5%. The most common place for fly tipping is our highways. 37% of fly tipping happens on highways. The most common size is a small van load, which I'm guessing you would expect, wouldn't you? It costs over 100 million a year. It depends on whose data you look at. Different people have different ranges of costs for that. Interestingly, despite fly tipping being on the increase, enforcement actions nationally have actually decreased, and the number of fixed penalty notices issued have actually decreased. That said, court fines have increased, but the total number have decreased. So when they are being prosecuted, the fines increasing, but the total numbers decreasing. So that's the national picture. Where are we in Kirklees? We're just under average in terms of the amount of fly tipping we see. So the national average rate of fly tipping is 20 incidents for every 1,000 residents. We're at 18.8. We're the red on the bar chart. They're our neighbours. We're middling. Generally, the north is much better than your London boroughs. They will see significantly higher numbers than this, and there are other areas with significantly lower numbers. So it's very much a mixed picture across the country. However, when you compare us to our nearest neighbours, we're not that far off. We're slightly below average. But it's not just the number of fly tips that impact on how people feel about fly tipping. It depends on the type of things that are being fly tipped, where it's being fly tipped, and whether you potentially live near an area that's a hot spot or an area that's seeing a lot of persistent fly tipping. So one of the other things we look at is fly tipping hotspots. Most wards have at least one hotspot. We've got Greenhead, Crossland Moor, Neverton, Dewsbury, Newsome have the highest number of hotspots. However, we don't want to just look at hotspots because some areas like Dalton have a lot of fly tipping but not necessarily a lot of hotspots. It's very dispersed. So there are a number of different things we want to consider when we consider whether fly tipping is a problem in an area, how many fly tips there are, whether it's happening in a particular place, how long it's staying there for, the types of things that are being fly tipped. So the data is useful, but it has to be taken in consideration with lots of other things. So we spoke about nationally what was happening with fly tipping. Is the same thing happening in Kirklees? Are we seeing an increase? Those different coloured bars on that chart represent different years, with grey being the start point in 2002, running up to orange now. And as you can see, generally the trend is, there's ups and downs, there's anomalies, but generally the trend is that fly tipping is on the increase in Kirklees as it is across the country. So the result of that is we ended up with quite a large backlog of fly tips. We were at a response time, as Councillor Pinnock said, of 12 weeks to clear a fly tip. And we had a backlog of over 1,400 fly tips. So at the start of September, we've made a really concerted effort to get those fly tips cleared and down. We are now below the 500 mark. I think it says 546 on there, but it's reduced since the writing of this presentation. and the response time is down to 4 weeks. We are aiming by Christmas that backlog is gone, we're on top of it, and we have a response time of around 3 weeks maximum. Now, for fly tips that are a health and safety issue, that is different. It's always been a 24 to 48 hour time frame to clear those where it poses a real health and safety risk, and we've always stuck to that. It's the other fly tips where this backlog's occurred. So I believe we're now around 300 as the backlog. Sorry, so since these slides have been produced, obviously we're moving on, aren't we? And we're moving on at pace. So that's great. We're clearing the backlog. So, you know, what do we do next? We clear the backlog, and do we do, which a lot of people ask, well, we've got the backlog down, everywhere's nice and clear. Let's get CCTV up everywhere. Get these people that are blighting our communities on camera and come down on them like a ton of bricks with enforcement. And that's often the thing that people go to. And it is a key strand of our work is CCTV and enforcement. Unfortunately, CCTV doesn't work for every type of fly tip. So back to that point at the beginning, it is brilliant when someone turns up in a van and you can get their number plate and then you can enforce. It's not so good if someone comes on foot, you can't see their face, and they dump a few bags of rubbish, which actually is a significant proportion of our fly tipping. So it works brilliantly in some cases, but not all. It also has quite a high displacement rate, so you end up having to move around and keep moving your seat. Once they find out it's in one place, they'll go somewhere else. So it's got to be a key part of our strategy, but we need to do more than just that. Equally, enforcement, we investigate every fly tip, but not every fly tip contains evidence that enables us to take forward with enforcement actions. People know not to leave personal data in there, not to leave information in there. So if it is just a mattress with no information attached to it, it hasn't got letters in there, it hasn't got things that mean we can tie it back to a person, we really struggle to enforce. So what do? There's a whole body of evidence on the things that you can do to tackle fly tipping, most of which has been done by colleagues we've heard from before in Keep Britain Tidy. And generally, it is believed that there are sort of 7 key things you do, 7 key strands you would do to tackle fly tipping. 5 of them are within our control to some degree, and two aren't. So it's things like ensuring people have the information that they need, that they understand what they can and can't do, they understand how to check someone's got a waste carrier's licence, they understand how to dispose of their waste responsibly, making it easy for people to do the right thing, being impactful with the enforcement, so having proper plans in place for enforcement, proper enforcement teams, having evidence-based policies, so picking the right types of things to target fly tipping in the right areas, and then supporting a circular economy, which can sound a bit wishy-washy, can't it? But what does that mean? Essentially, we have a lot of stuff now. Everybody has a lot of stuff, and stuff breaks really, really easily. So the less things people own that break very quickly, the less stuff that ends up in our waste stream. So things like our repair cafes, things like our reuse shops that keep things in people's homes and not going into their bins, or worse still, into landfill, help reduce fly tipping. If people have less junk to throw away. So that's a very big aim. It's not very, it's more of an indirect way of tackling fly tipping, is to tackle it at the source of stop people producing rubbish that breaks after 5 minutes, and more of a make do and mend attitude. And then the 2 that we don't really have as much influence over, although there are lots of people working on this and working really hard on this, are looking at the licensing system for carriers, brokers and dealers, and making sure that that is really robust, and looking at sentencing in magistrates' courts, because all of these things together can help us tackle fly tipping. So what would I suggest we do going forward, or what are we looking at doing going forward? We're on top of this backlog, but we know demand is increasing. Now, we don't have a bottomless pit of money to keep putting more and more resources in to keep cleaning up after people. We need to try and get the demand down. We need to try and reduce fly tipping. And we are in the process of developing a fly tipping strategy, which will also be a litter strategy. It's a fly tipping and litter strategy that takes a really evidence-based approach to the deployment of the right interventions in the right place to try and stem that demand, stop it before it happens. So that's happening now. There's workshops that hopefully you guys will have heard about or will hear about that are happening across the district, and we're doing that in conjunction with Keep Britain Tidy. So hopefully from their previous presentation you will have heard about how they take a really sort of detailed evidence-based approach to this type of work. We'd like to deploy that. As I said, we'll be doing that across services, we'll be doing that with communities, we'll be doing that with councillors, so it will be a co-designed strategy, a co-designed plan, and with people like yourself in Scrutiny, and it might be useful for us to come back to Scrutiny as well with this at another point when we're further in the development, because I know it's of a particular interest to this group and we do very much welcome input. So I don't want to preempt what the strategy is going to say, because there's so many different interventions that are proven to work on fly tipping, and I can't go through all of them because there are hundreds. So what I'm going to do is pick out a couple of things you might see in the strategy and a couple of things we potentially will try. And they're very specific, and they're linked to a very specific type of fly tipping. So at the beginning of the presentation, I spoke about most of the fly tipping being, 60% of fly tipping being householder type fly tipping. So there's a couple of interventions that very much link to tackling householder fly tipping that I'd just like to talk you through, so you've got a flavour of the kind of things we'll be looking to include. But what we do and don't include, and where we do and don't deploy them, will very much depend on that evidence and data that we're in the process of developing and collecting now. So the first one is the crime scene investigation tape that Natalie talked about that we're using in Heckmondwike and trialling at the moment. So the purpose of this intervention and the reason that it was designed was when research was done to understand why people fly tip and the motivations and the things that might make them stop. There are a number of people who don't think fly tipping is criminal, they don't understand that it's criminal, and they don't understand the repercussions of it. So it really taps into that by putting a feedback loop in that highlights, by putting the tape on it, what you have done is wrong, it is criminal. So it's to tackle that belief that's leading to the behaviour. And the results of that are quite significant, up to 73% in some areas, but your average reduction is 64%, and really importantly, less than 1% displacement, because that's the key thing. There's no point in stopping fly tipping in one area if you just displace it to somebody else. We don't want to fix it in one ward and make it somebody else's ward's problem. And then pre-intervention, so you asked, there was a question asked before, wasn't there, about going back after the work in Heckmondwike. This has been done with this kind of fly tipping work elsewhere. So, sorry, I should say, these aren't our results. These are results of this intervention trialled elsewhere. We're trialling it now in Heckmondwike. When we've got those results, we'll be able to share them, and then we'll use them as part of our strategy. It's on average 50% lower than pre-intervention when you go back after a period of time. And again, back to that point on perceptions and how people feel about the work, residents like this intervention and feel that it shows that the council are doing something to tackle fly tipping. I'm going to take you through another one, again aimed at the same type of fly tipping, but it's tapping into a different belief that's leading to the behaviour. So this isn't highlighting that fly tipping is criminal. Maybe these people already know that it's criminal, but they don't believe it has a big impact or a high cost. So they don't really see the social and financial implications of fly tipping. So it's really highlighting that. So when someone fly tips, you put a stencil that says that that fly tipping is costing the community money. You might even say how much money. It depends on how you choose to use the intervention. Or you might highlight that it costs the same as the provision of something locally, maybe a community centre or something of that nature. And that taps in to a different value base in people, that it isn't low cost, that it is having an impact, and that money could potentially be better spent somewhere else on another service that is important to me. That has an average reduction of 67% with no displacement. Post-intervention, slightly higher, initially 63%, but then if you go back 2 years, it's down at 30%. So that does indicate that this is something that over a period of time you would potentially have to refresh on a couple of year basis. So it gives you an indication of how often you'd have to deploy the intervention as well. Residents prefer this one to the other one. This has got a slightly higher, they like both, but this has got a slightly higher, from that perception perspective, residents felt this showed the council was really working to tackle fly tipping. So as I said, that's just 2 interventions. There are countless, and it's they're around a very specific kind of fly tipping because that's one of our most prevalent types. But the purpose of working to do the strategy is to really get to the bottom of what's driving fly tipping in Kirklees, who's doing it, and what are the best interventions to tackle that in those areas. And those workshops are happening now. So I'd love to be able to tell you this is exactly what we're going to do, but I don't want to preempt the workshops and the data and the information. And hopefully you'll be reassured what we're trying to move to here, and I've spoke about fly tipping, but this is going to be applied to litter too, is taking a much more evidence-based approach to how we tackle these issues, accepting that we're always going to have people that do this, and we, no matter how hard we work with these interventions, there will be some degree of littering and fly tipping, and when we have that, we have to be really efficient and effective in deployment of our resources. So that's the other thing we look at, how we deploy our teams, how we deploy our resources to be as efficient, as effective as possible. So we're using our resources as well as we can to clean up when we do need to clean up. But ideally, let's stop the mess in the first place. So that's it.
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Kat. Quite a few questions, comments.
How many?
So firstly,
just the important ones.
Just a comment on the fly tipping. Part of why we've managed to bring the backlog down is because we put more resources into it, isn't it? So if we hadn't cut the resources in the first place, we may not have got the uplift in fly tipping. But that's just a comment. The benchmarking put us in the middle. But I'm guessing if we looked at that on a slightly lower level, so we started looking at different areas, we'd see very significant difference. So perhaps when we start to look at this as a Kirklees level, when we start gathering that data, I think that would be invaluable so we understand that it will be different, experienced differently. And it did come out a bit in your presentation when you talked about Crossing Moor and Newsome, and then in Dalton it's little bits everywhere, not in one place. You spread it around. You like to share. As I wrote down a comment, but as you were talking, you seemed to indicate that the target was to have fly tipping removed within 3 weeks, longer term. I'd love to see something more ambitious than that. And as a council, we talk about net zero. We talk about vision zero from road traffic collisions. I'd love to have a zero in there, because that's what our ambition ought to be. Now, that's going to be difficult to ever get to, but if we don't set out a reasonably ambitious target, it's about shooting for the stars and reaching the moon or something like that. A couple more. One of the slides said one of the solutions is make it easy for households to do the right thing. Yet as a council, we probably had made it more difficult for households. So I don't want to reopen a wound that I've already reopened once today, but it's 2 words, and one begins with N and one begins with L. But the closure on our Blaine, people in the north will say that that has had an impact. There's also, and again, Andrew probably knows this far better than I do, that at the end of the student year, you have kind of a period where there's stuff that's fly tipped, where the students have moved, and there's stuff that's been left behind. And it is in part because you have some people within our community that they may not have transport, and you can't exactly take a mattress on the bus to get it to a tip, can you? And we charge for collecting items. So there is something about the most vulnerable, the most disadvantaged, probably have the biggest challenge in terms of how they deal with those larger items. So something we need to think about how we help those communities or those people in those communities, because we don't make it easy for them. We in fact make it very, very difficult for them. Yeah, the fly tipping strategy, you talk about workshops and councils getting involved, but I've heard nothing. And I'm all over this sort of stuff, so I'm not sure that any council has actually been engaged or... You have? Well, I don't know how that's...
Yeah, we've all been invited.
Yeah, they've done that on purpose. Just 2 more. On the crime scene stuff, I don't understand how we know there's no displacement. because we say there's no displacement, but how do we know that? And then finally, your social impact stencils, I absolutely hate them, because our areas are scruffy enough as it is, and all you're doing is adding more scruff to areas. So I would be very uncomfortable if we really went ahead with something like that. I'll stop there.
Right, so I'll start, but I'm going to hand over to Will for certain parts. There's a logic behind the 3 weeks, actually. So, but when we do the workshops, we might choose a different time frame for collection of fly tipping. That's the whole point of the strategy when we're doing the workshops and we're speaking to people. But there is a slight logic behind it, which shows that sometimes if you collect fly tipping too quickly, it encourages fly tipping, because people know that it's not causing a problem. So they can become with unwritten rules that if I leave it in the corner of that car park on a Friday, the council have collected it by Monday. So it's not causing any environmental damage, it's not causing a problem. It becomes an informal waste collection stream. So you don't necessarily always want it to be quicker than your waste collection, but that will all be investigated as part of the strategy. So you asked about that. So we'll look into that. It's not a set, but we're aiming for that at the moment. You asked about you spoke about the stencils. So what I will say to you is there's lots of things I see that organisations, behaviour change organisations do, and I think that's awful. I hate that. And actually, when I've worked for behaviour change organisations, I've often chimed in and gone, "Don't like that picture," and you should. And you're not our target audience, Catherine. You don't fly tip. It's not aimed to be attractive to you. It's aimed to work for the people causing the problem. And if it works for them and it stops the problem, it's the right solution. So it's like an advert, isn't it? If it's an advert for a product that I don't want to buy.
Fundamentally disagree. It might be there's a different target audience and it might work for them. But if what you're doing for the rest of residents who are behaving correctly,
oh,
you're
you mean if
making
other
their
residents
area
don't
look
like
dreadful
it?
and scruffy, you can't just focus on the people who are fly tipping. You've got to think about the impact on the entire community. And similarly, with leaving the rubbish there for a few days, because that will discourage them from doing it again, you've got to remember that us councillors are the ones who get the phone calls every day. Why hasn't that been removed? Why hasn't it been removed?
Yeah.
So you can't just think about the fly tippers. You have to think about the broader impact on the entire community. And the entire community want to live in a tidy, clean place. And they do their bit to keep it tidy and clean. What they don't want is the council telling them we're going to leave things that look dirty and scruffy, because that will discourage people from making the place look dirty and scruffy.
So that's the reason that alongside any intervention, there is a perceptions survey done to see how people feel about it. So lots of people like these things. You might not like them, I might not like them, but lots of people do like them. So that perceptions piece is done alongside the, does it reduce the fly tipping or not? So if in a particular community, you went into a community and the perception survey was, we hate this and we think it shows the council isn't doing the right thing, that would be taken into consideration. So exactly what you're saying, if people really didn't like it and people felt that it was reducing pride in place, perception is an important element that would be considered. But so far, that's not been the feedback on these types of interventions. That's not to say that won't be the feedback we get in this area. We don't know yet. So that's why, alongside what's it actually doing, is it actually working? What is the perception is also measured alongside interventions. So the two key things. Will, do you want to come in? Have I missed some things you wanted to come in on?
Do you want me to?
No, I was going to say, I've been here many times, so I've listed them all. I'm experienced. No, I was going to come in on the how quickly we want to target collections. Like I said, at the moment, we're going to aim for the sort of 3 to 4 weeks window, because I think that's a reasonable level, but we will always prioritise the health and safety related ones within 24 to 48 hours. And at the moment, we've aimed at that because what we don't want to do is just keep throwing resources at this until we have an understanding what the strategy and what the outcome is and what some of these interventions are. Because if we start to provide a fly tipping collection service that is better than our bin collection service, residents will naturally move towards using that. And as you saw some of the sort of figures on there, at 60% is household waste that people are walking on foot to put there. Then it will likely more encourage people to put more waste there because they know it's going to be gone within a week, rather than having to wait 2 weeks till the bin collection day. So at the moment we're trying to balance that whilst the fly tipping strategy and litter strategy comes. In terms of sort of the nabbling and making things harder, that's why we want to take this evidence-based route. That's why we brought Keep Britain Tidy on board, who can show what the economic benefits of something are to build into business cases. So once we've done the fly tipping strategy and litter strategy, we understand what does and doesn't work within the district. We can build up that business case for the organisation and to say why we want to invest in this way, why we want to change something, as opposed to where we've perhaps been, which is doing the same thing and hoping that it works, whilst we've had financial pressures on the authority as well. So we're trying to get ahead of ourselves with this, to sort of plan for the next 3, 4, 5 years, rather than sort of living year to year in what the intervention is going to be. But I think also within that we highlighted about communicating better to people, because a lot of people don't know that actually there's a discount of 50% for bulky waste collections. Those who have an assisted collection get a number of free collections a year for bulky waste, that recognise that they can't always get to a household waste site, but we're not being particularly good at really advertising that that's there and providing people that option. So some people find out it's there and go, oh, I could have used that because I've been struggling to get rid of something. So I think some of this is about actually the communication, how we better tell people what those options are, refreshing if those options are the right ones, if we need to change some discounts, if we need to look at some more free options, other interventions that can sort of come in as well. But we're sort of in this little bit of no man's land at the moment. We're quickly accelerating the strategy, and we're hoping that this is going to be ready within the sort of early next year to inform where we go for bidding for next financial year, without doing too much now and investing too much now. So we have put more resource in to try and get on top of the backlog, to try and get to a reasonable position while this other thing's come and inform us. And I'm reliably told that group leaders were informed of workshops 3 weeks ago. But we'll pick that up out here about making sure that people were aware. And we have held some workshops as well.
Just, I passed that straight on to members of my group.
So we're not going to point fingers or anything, but we'll make sure that we capture it, because the intention of this, the whole approach and getting Keep Britain Tidy on is, as I've explained today, that we bring everyone into this strategy. This is not just officers deciding to put some resource here or there. This is listening to the communities, understanding where the issues are, understanding what doesn't work, and building that into a strategy that is not an officer's strategy that is adopted by Cabinet. It is a Kirklees strategy that is built upon what Kirklees is, and the differences in our communities and the differences in their needs. And then that builds into the business case to go, as Councillor Pinnock mentioned, as going into say, well, what resources are required for this? Have we got the right shape of resources in terms of the Green Space Action Team and the rangers and the enforcement, etc.? Do we want more CCTV, and how do we work that? Do we want something different to CCTV, etc.? And that will then build a business case into next year. And I think hopefully this is quite an exciting and different approach that we're taking to just sort of the annual cycle of trying to put more resource into it, and then we're running out of money, then we've got to take resource out of it, and then it gets worse again, and trying to break that cycle.
I know that other members of the panel wanted to come in, and I've not forgotten you, Councillor Lawson. Okay, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a lot, but I won't do them all. I'll come in and out if I'm allowed to, because I don't want to be greedy, Chair. The first question I had, just a few definitions and information we were missing. How much does it actually cost Kirklees fly tipping every year? What's the figure on that? How do we define hotspots? What does that actually mean? And how do we monitor them? And we've noted from the data that fly tipping appears to be on the rise. Why? Why do we think that is happening?
So in terms of costs, it's actually really difficult to calculate an overall cost, because there's a number of components to it. There's the cost of the team, there's the cost of the disposal, and then there's also other costs like environmental costs, economic costs, broader costs to the area and the community. So the broader team that deal with fly tipping is 1.2 million, but they don't just do fly tipping, they do a number of other things as well. So we can't attribute all of that to fly tipping, and that cost doesn't include the disposal of those materials either. And sometimes if fly tipping is incredibly complex, it could be a multi-agency cost. So we might have a massive fly tip somewhere that is a criminal situation that we're involved in, the EA are involved in. There might be money back through once it's cleared, but it's, you know, it's very difficult in those situations where you've got, and I believe there have been situations like that in Kirklees before, haven't there, where we bore the brunt of a cost, but then another agency's picked it up at a later date, and so on and so forth. So it's actually quite a tricky one, which is why when you look at the national data, depending on whose data you look at, there'll be quite a broad range of costs attributed to fly tipping. But again, that's part of us. The strategy is getting a better handle on exactly what is this costing us, not just from a financial perspective, but from that broader perspective of what's the cost to how people feel about their areas as well. You know, not just the financial cost, more broadly, understanding that better so we can measure it better. So that's where we want to get to, is having much more clarity on that. That's why we want to do a bit more of a robust sort of strategy piece. Do you want to come in, Will? Is there anything?
And I was going to say, we get FOIs on this all the time. I was just trying to grab the latest one, but we can send across the FOI where we're estimating roughly what it costs us. But it is that tricky.
If you can remember to turn your mic off.
It is that trickiness about what proportional, and also if you're a street sweeper and you're walking up the road and you'll just pick that bag up as well. So it's what's the fly tipping that never comes in to the whole system, which is why, again, we keep reiterating, we've gone to this evidence-based, database-led approach, so we can start to estimate these things better, and also what the return on any investment would be.
We'll take it in turns today. So we do our hotspots either by, for example, a car park where we get one report for sofa, the next week there's a report for fridge, but it's all there at the same kind of time. Or we'll do it consistent reports at one location that's more heavily bagged waste that's walked. So we have a kind of areas either around housing estates or industrial estates where people are walking just black bag waste. They tend to be the two main things. As soon as there's kind of 3 reports in one location, we'll class it as a hotspot, as opposed to waiting over a long period of time.
Okay, and that's three reports, even potentially of the same fly tipping, or 3 reports of different fly tipping?
Different, we cleanse the data. Yeah.
And the general theory as to why there is a rise in fly tipping?
We can all have a go, and we'll all probably be a little bit right, a little bit wrong. From our perspective, there's always been a level of commercial fly tipping which we deal with generally through cameras and enforcement that's always bubbled along, and that's companies choosing to do the wrong thing, you know, basically. Where we're seeing the rise, I think, is more in your Facebook type approaches. It is more expensive to dispose of waste properly now. There's a lot of extra cost in terms of landfill tax, a lot of extra cost in terms of reprocessing. The amount of money you get for recycler is less now, so it's generally more expensive. Alongside labour rates are increasing, the fuel's increasing. So when someone goes on Facebook and says, could you please look at my backyard and tell me how much to clear it, and it comes back in the hundreds or thousands of pounds, there's a trend of people then looking for the person who's charged, that said it's 50 quid. So that's why we're saying that we think that the approach taken will differ depending on the intent behind the fly tip. And we're seeing 60% of that household waste, that's generally split between the people that's been on Facebook and asked for the person in a van to come and collect it at a fee that's too good to refuse, versus those that are just walking onto the end of the road and sort of dropping it over the edge, which some of that we've discovered is cultural as well, and not perhaps understanding how a waste collection system works, how best to use the waste collection system. So there's a whole blend of reasons as to why things are increasing, and that's why if someone had a silver bullet and the understanding of why there's one specific cost to this, everyone across the country would be doing the same thing.
And there is a campaign running at the moment nationally with Keep Britain Tidy on the rogue trader type of waste, where people are going onto social media, finding people having the waste taken away cheaply by unlicensed carriers. So that is a growing area of concern, that there are things being trialled at the moment that hopefully we'll be able to learn from and put into our pilot. But again, as Will said, it's different causes, but ultimately we all have more stuff than we've ever had. We own more things. We buy lots of things are available very cheaply online, we replace things very quickly, things are disposable, we over-consume and things break very easily. And people don't necessarily have the skills to fix and repair and mend, and therefore there's more stuff to end up in places, isn't there? if you're looking right back to the root, although that's very far away, but if you go right back to the cause, it's the amount of things we have.
I have got more, Chair, but I'll let others in.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Longstaff.
Yeah, you mentioned the Magistrates' Court, so I better come in. Obviously, courts are independent, but we get our guidelines from the Sentencing Council. And I would think there's that high-profile case with that council that's going to take its entire yearly budget to clear up the mess that's just happened. We could get our MPs, lobby hard to the Home Secretary, and obviously get the Sentencing Council to give a bit more leeway on our powers. I would love to give someone 28 days in prison, and that would make the news for fly tipping. However, they'd appeal my decision and I get overruled because I'm outside my bandwidth. So there is ways we can do it. I always tell all my colleagues as a councillor, the one big issue that people have that affect their quality of life is fly tipping. It does affect their quality of life. But we need that lobby of our MPs to the Home Secretary and the Sentencing Council to up the bandwidth we can do. Because at the moment, people will take the risk of getting a fine vis-a-vis how much it's going to cost to do it properly. So that is, I will lobby hard on my side, do not worry.
I'd just like to say I support that 100%. We had a case in the Newsham ward not very long ago, well 2016, and it cost the council £1.1 million to clear up the waste from Sam Hunter. And Sam Hunter received a sentence of 300 hours unpaid work, so 8 or 9 weeks. And we don't know yet. I don't know whether anything was achieved from the proceeds of crime, but you look at that and you think about the damage, the time that the fire brigade took, the smell, the rats, everything that came with that, and it seemed like you could argue that that person got off extremely lightly. Sorry to intervene. It's something I feel quite passionate about.
Can I respond to that as well? And I think I'm glad you've sort of pointed that out. My understanding is there a trend that magistrates don't actually understand the severity of how it impacts on local authorities. And when they dish out the sentencing, it really reflects their lack of understanding. I'm not saying that's you personally, but my understanding is that is the trend with magistrates.
I think going back to that, obviously the magistrates have their association where you can lobby hard with the magistrates. The judges have their own system as well. We should explain to them how important this is. And I think that high-profile case where the entire budget of the council is a great time to up our communications with the people who could change the rules. And I'd be interested to know how many hours he carried out on that, by the way. It's not a guarantee that he did every hour.
No, I offered to supervise the work. Yeah, so Councillor Khan, Kevin?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Well, it's no surprise that there's a correlation between how much resources we have, you know, in terms of enforcement officers and what our charges are, even though I do think we've got generous discounts for vulnerable people. So that's not surprising at all. And I agree with this kind of one solution all isn't going to fit every ward. Like John said earlier, his ward may need a different solution. I do like the idea of crime scene tapes because it reminds the public that this is actually a crime. People don't necessarily see as a crime. Stencils, I think, yes, it depends on the location, how visible. You don't want it on a high street in the middle of the village or, well, you might want to, but and it depends on how locals feel as well. So that engagement with councillors is incredibly important before doing that. And I just wanted to say that in the past, what we've done when we had I mean, I believe we've only got 2 enforcement officers and you're recruiting at the moment. But in the past, when we had a bigger team and resources, that officers were, some were more proactive on social media, targeting these waste businesses, you know, waste collection businesses, and proactively asking them to produce their licence, which I thought was very, very effective. But of course, then we had the cuts and things, and reduction in staff members. So that fell by the wayside. Sorry, pun not attended. And I think also in terms of relationship with councillors, our definitions of hotspots and things is going to be different, because I believe we have 3 or 4 hotspots in Dalton. The council doesn't believe me, but that's another. But I'm looking at those same locations over, you know, historically over the last 11, 12 years I've been there, and the public would say, Dalton, people in Dalton would say that they're hotspots, but it may not fit your definition. So it's a matter of perception, really. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, generally I'm in support of this strategy. And if we ever do have the resources, I would appreciate a more proactive approach to tackling fly tipping. That's all.
Can I just respond to Councillor Taylor? You said you haven't been invited to any of the workshops. I believe there's one tomorrow morning between 10 and 12, if you're available.
Okay, fair enough. Nick.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. One, we'll have some more council sessions as well, so we'll make sure those are in there. And just to confirm, we, and to the much delight of the team, have successfully recruited, so we have 5 enforcement officers now in post, which are making a real difference. We have a number of covert and overt cameras in operation, and I'm regularly down at Red Door signing off enforcement things now, so that's a pleasure. But I think I would link back to Councillor Longstaff's point that it's sometimes difficult in my position as head of service to keep the motivation of the team going when they put so much effort, and it is a huge amount of effort, and I'd welcome any member of Scrutiny to come in and sit with the team to go through what it takes to get an enforcement pack together, to then have people who've committed 28 fly tips and received a rap on the list and a few £100 and no custodial. So we would very much, I think, take from today, look at that lobbying, look at that sentencing, and whilst the magistrate might want to throw the book at them, I think there are sort of things that are being blocked at the moment that we need to unblock.
Yeah, we need to unblock it. Just so you know, they don't say this to my face, but I'm known nickname Judge Dredd. Okay?
He is the law. Okay. Kevin?
Sorry, can I say one thing on that?
Yes, if you get to a microphone. Yep.
I'm so sorry for jumping in. We launched in Parliament a couple of weeks ago our fly tipping action plan, and that includes recommendations for obviously not only at a local level but at a national level, and it does include things like lobbying the Sentencing Council for more stringent guidelines around what should and shouldn't be done, but it has a whole host of other recommendations in there, and we were asking MPs and councillors to support that and look at how they could push for what we've put into that action plan as what we think could be done to help that the situation, as you were talking about before, in that fly tipping is actually growing across the country. So just wanted to add that, and if you're interested, we can make sure that we send it to the team and they can distribute it to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin?
A couple of fairly short clarification questions. So we talked about bringing that backlog down at a target time of 3 weeks for collection. Is that 3 weeks to collect and remove rubbish which was taped on day one, or is that 3 weeks to attend, put some tape on, and then it stays there for another period afterwards?
So that's the current backlog that we've not been doing the pilot taping on. That's just
But
this.
but under the new model, if I report a fly tipping
Okay.
incident, is it 3 weeks for someone to attend and tape it and then removal at a later date, or is it?
It's clear that would be for it to be
Okay,
gone.
so the
gone.
taping would happen sometime within
Yeah,
that 3
yeah,
weeks.
yeah.
Private. Thank you. Second one was just more a point of sort of data order. It would be fascinating to see on your slide detailing the number of fly tipping incidents. You had us at 18.8. The bit of data that's conspicuous by its absence there is the volume of rubbish dumped in each one. So that Kidlington example of 150 metres and 400,000 tonnes of rubbish would be one. There's obviously a very large difference between, we only had 2 incidents last year, but it was 1 million tonnes, and we had 2, which was a bag of nappies. So it would be fascinating to see what those look like. And then the third thing was just, I guess a challenge or a question on, there's lots of reference to no displacement, but I'm curious as to where does it go then? And if we didn't displace it, which means it presumably was disposable via another route, taking the point that mattresses are hard for students and so on. Why was that not a first course of action?
So the no displacement means you have stopped people doing the thing. You've stopped people fly tipping. They have realised that they shouldn't be doing it, that there are better means of doing it, and they are now disposing of their waste via legal routes. So that you know, what they've not done is gone. What you've not done is just stop them from doing it in that area. You know, they've not gone somewhere else. People are not doing it.
And how do we count that? Is that specifically within Kirklees? So if I drove to Bradford and dumped my wardrobe, would that count as displacement? Or would we catch it at all? Not trying to put you on the spot for difficulty, I just want to understand that number of no displacement. Sounds like an incredible win for a really difficult to solve problem.
Yeah, so we're trialling now, so we don't know what our results are now. They're just results of national pilots that have been done. So there'll have been control areas picked. Do you want to come in and explain the methodology? Because I've forgotten.
So yeah, it will be where we've tested this in other areas, and displacement means that they will create an area where the hotspot was. They will understand how big the hotspot is, but also the areas surrounding hotspots and the surrounding area, and they'll track how many other fly tips there are and make sure that when we're saying there's no displacement, there is no other fly tips happening as a result. So it's not that it's gone from that street to 5 streets over. If it went from here to another borough, we wouldn't have tracked that. However, I think that's highly unlikely because from the type of intervention that it wasn't targeting those mass.
It's because it's householder fly
Yeah,
tipping, so
it's
the
because
stuff that Will's talking about on foot. So that's very different and a very different kind of intervention than someone driving around in a van doing illegal fly tipping where your displacement could be anywhere. So those particular methods are very specific to a particular kind of fly tipping by a particular kind of person. So if it was a different kind of fly tipping, that methodology wouldn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they would just get in the van and take it somewhere else.
And just on the data, that's nationally available data. So one thing that we do well is that all that data goes into a national database system. It's developed in, is it a van load, is it a single bag, and that's all crunched and put onto a website, so anybody can go on and look at that data, look at the detail underneath it, and it's so far in arrears because that's nationally gathered and cleansed and put together. So we should soon, hopefully, see it the next year on and see where we are more accurate than the 23-24.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to bring Councillor Lawson in next because she's specifically come to this panel and has a particular interest in fly tipping, which of course we all do. Go on.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Kat, for your presentation. I would also like to commend the actual team for for the work that they've actually done with reducing the fly tip collection rate from 12 weeks down to 4 weeks, and I really do hope that that will continue down to sort of the target. I'd like to see 2 weeks, but I can understand how if it's reported on a Friday and it's gone on a Monday, everybody's going to bring their bag of rubbish out there. I would also like to thank the team for meeting with myself and Alex Vickers to discuss the fly tipping problems and the work that has been done within Thornton Lodge, which has significantly reduced the fly tip in one problematic area. I did actually attend the Kirklees littering and fly tipping strategy. It was good to actually see not only councillors, Kirklees officers, but actually people that are there on the forefront, the community groups and various things. Is being able to put names to faces to groups that I've followed on Facebook there. What we found in my group was, it was a question of trying to make it easier for certain people, certain demographics in deprived areas to actually be able to dispose of the bulky waste, so that it isn't sort of tipped over the fence and going down a banking because they can't afford to pay that. I would like to look at sort of various things around sort of mobile waste collection units, going into various places where you are moving mattresses, sofas, whatever, on sort of maybe a 2 month, 3 month basis. Now, one of my personal bugbears is that bag of rubbish by the litter bin. Because and I would love to see some comms around that actually said that bag costs £50 to remove. That is money that we could be sorting potholes, various things like that. And also to point out that it is a criminal offence. I quite like the idea of having the crime scene tape. Obviously, I would want it there for a couple of days and then the rubbish removed because it loses its effectiveness. But it is getting that message across to people that it is actually a crime. And stencils on various things in certain places, I would sort of say in parks or in various places, I would definitely say they actually work. Looking at the message that you can actually put across to people, it might be it costs X amount taken from youth services. Other people, it's like the state of their roads. If they know how much fly tipping, even coming down to, like I say, that one bag of rubbish at a bin, because I just drive around my ward and there are just certain areas I just look out the corner of my eye and, oh yeah, there's one there. But thank you.
Maybe a speech bubble on the wall. Do you want us to fill your potholes or get rid of this rubbish? Okay. I know that members of the panel want to come back in. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just back on the displacement point, because I mentioned it as well, and I agree. I think probably it is very, very different in different areas across the ward, because what you don't tend to see so much in my patch is that they walk to the end of the road and dumped a bag of rubbish. What in my patch we get, it's the country lanes, and I know where the hot spots are, where, you know, the van turns up and they dump it. You know, you go up into Whitley and Breezefield and you're seeing stuff that's probably coming out of the urban areas. And again, to the point about when we're measuring displacement, if you're looking at an urban area, actually, quite often, it is being displaced, but it's being displaced out of that town into the rural areas surrounding it. And you go up to Whitley and Breezefield, and all the time, every time you go up there, there's something that's been dumped up there on the lanes. So I think there is displacement happening, certainly in the more rural areas, because you don't have that same challenge. And I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Lawson, around there are certain demographics and groups and people, and that's what I was talking about with the students, that, you know, we need to have some different type of support to enable them to dispose of some of this waste, because they're flighting it because they don't have the answer to how they could otherwise deal with that waste, really.
It's a really good point about how the waste can end up in an area and it not be generated in that area, and that's why actually as much as it's important for councillors to be focused on their local area and feeding information on the local area, being involved more broadly in the fly tipping strategy is quite important too, because campaigns that are done in areas to stop people using rogue traders, going on social media, getting cheap disposal, will have an impact in wards where there's large outdoor spaces and people are maybe disposing of that rubbish. That might not be where it's being generated. It might be, we don't know that for sure, but it might be coming from a different area, and the campaign to target the rubbish in one area might need to take place in a different area. So that broader piece, as well as that very local look, which is important, that sort of broader, bigger picture look is important as well, about the way in which the campaigns hit, and specifically campaigns around student accommodation, homes in multiple occupation. I know, again, there's bodies and bodies of research on this type of thing, on the types of interventions that can help reduce waste in those situations. So it's about bringing together all of the data, all of the information, looking at what is causing the problem in certain areas, and then developing the right kind of solution.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up on the displacement point again before I get to my other point. It absolutely happens that cross-borough dumping occurs. I mean, in my patch, we know full well that quite a lot of the fly tipping that happens at Scamandon is people from Oldham, traders from Oldham, driving along the way road across the border, dumping it in a rural area. So that displacement can't be sort of, it does happen. It's not unlikely, and it can't be sort of ruled out of the data on our approaches. But going back to what I was going to say, the work on clearing the backlog is impressive. Well done, and thank you. That's quite quick that you've managed to clear that backlog, and the extra resources has obviously not been a waste at all. And thank you for that, because that's making a massive difference to the lives of all of our residents. So it deserves recognition.
They've just driven it across the border to Bradford.
We haven't. I promise sure. We haven't. The team have worked. We really focused on this, and we set that target for ourselves to get this down. We worked out what it would take, and the team have worked really, really hard. So it's a testament to our frontline staff, because they're the people out there dealing with this, doing very tricky task.
Yeah, and we sit here and answer them, but it's people like Aoife on the end of the table that manages the team day to day. Yeah. And obviously they're the ones that we're trying to give them a voice in this as well, because there's some frustration in the team in terms of, well, if we could do this as a council, we could do that as a council. Hence, it wasn't just waste and cleansing that was on that diagram. It was actually how can the broad breadth of the services that we provide all help and focus on this situation that affects everybody.
Absolutely. And we all know as policymakers that we can write all the strategic documents that we want, but it's our officers on the ground that do the work and make the difference and help our communities. So thank you. Moving on to the strategy, I was very pleased to hear you say in your presentation that there's an opportunity for some pre-decision scrutiny. It's an absolutely perfect opportunity to come back to us, and we have actually been umming and ahhing about a potential field trip for ourselves this year. So we went to the dump not so long ago to have a look at their things. So if we could have a visit to your place and perhaps talk more in depth there in private before the document's drawn up, and then again when the document's ready, I for one would be all in favour of that, because the better you engage with us, the more buy-in you get from us, just the better. It's well worth doing. And at the risk of disagreeing agreeably with Councillor Taylor on the stencils, I agree with what officers have said about an evidence-based approach. If the evidence is that by and large residents don't mind them and that they work, I think a lot of people would find it a fair compromise that, okay, I prefer the stencil not to be there, but if it's a choice between having the stencil and having more fly tipping, then I know which one I think my residents would choose. But again, it might depend. But fundamentally, we should have an evidence-based approach to the policy, not a sort of gut feelings-based approach to the policy. So I agree with you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay. I'm with you on the stencils. I'm with you on the tape. I think that I love the tape. We have stickers in our ward that we put on rubbish every now and again just to say we've reported it. So it stops the re-reporting of waste, so I'm a big favour of it. And it's a crime, and we've got to make people feel like criminals when they are. You know, I'm definitely with Judge Longstaff on this. You know, I give him a black hanky to stick on his head personally, but you know, yeah. But there we go. So yeah, all good stuff. I mean, the stuff about the students, it's not just at the end of term; it's at the beginning of term. We have people who are given a house to look after for the first time when they only had a bedroom. And so often teenagers put in charge of a household is not always a good idea, and so we find that in large parts of our ward near the university. So very keen on the work that's done with. I know that your staff do on that education side of things and visiting households and providing that support and help that's often needed by people who just need a bit of a hand. And then there's the mattresses. We have mattress season when the mattresses get thrown out. We think probably by unscrupulous landlords who just who put something on. Oh, you've got a fresh mattress for the new term. Where's the old one gone? So I think there's certainly work to be done with landlords there about their responsibilities. So keen on that. I do think we need to be feeding back to government about the sentencing side of things, and I think that's something we can do through the local government association and using that route as a way of getting the voice of local government across to all. So there we go. Thank you very much for the presentation. I know that you know that real efforts have been made. I've noticed that the turnaround times have got quicker. I've been thanked for waste that I haven't been able to report yet. On one occasion, I confess. It's like, thank you, Councillor Cooper, it's been moved. Okay. But yeah, so that's good, and I do get 100% that if we just go and pick it up as soon as they chuck it out, that they'll think that that's what is. We've got to have there's got to be a certain amount of inconvenience, because this is, you know, it is wrong for the community to have that stuff, and it shouldn't be there for months, as it has been doing a bit earlier on. But you know, I think as long as it is picked up within a week or 2 weeks, those sort of things, I think that's reasonable. That's my take on it anyway. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. We've got a little. I think we'll call that a close. We've got just to go over the work programme. I think. Anything anybody wants to bring onto the work programme? No. Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor McLaughlin. So I'm just not looking carefully enough today. I'm not.
Well, yeah, well, at the risk of repeating what we said when we discussed the work. Councillor Lawson? The meeting's still going on, thank you. At the risk of repeating what we said when we discussed the working group, the work programme last time, we talked about parking enforcement and the impact of the parking charges as a possibility. We haven't actually had a report on how we're progressing towards our net zero by 2038 target. And as the Environment and Climate Change Scrutiny Panel, I think we should have a proper update from the administration about how we are progressing towards what is a very ambitious target. So I would like that to come to scrutiny at some point, please.
Okay, I think we're getting a briefing note on parking charges, so that's coming. Parking, pardon?
Circulated to the panel informally.
Okay. So there's that. I 100% agree with you on climate change. We should certainly be having something like the 2038 target. Not confident given recent lack of action and lack of taking up opportunities to take energy efficiency grants from government that we are doing all we can on climate change. And so, yeah, I'd like to sort of get some sort of update in before the end of our municipal term on this panel. So we will try and do that. Thank you. Anything else before we close the meeting? Thank you for your attendance, and let's take it from there.